Good afternoon to the Sushant School of Planning and Development led webinar on unlocking transport systems in urban areas amid COVID-19. I'm pleased to welcome the distinguished panelists, moderator, and the members of the audience. As you might have noticed that it's for an hour and a half that we are going to get together to deliberate on this important topic. And the panelists, the distinguished members of the panel are going to review and reflect on the key evidences that have been coming around on issues related to transportation and mobility in urban areas and the challenges that we are all confronted with. Let me now invite and introduce the panelists and the moderator to the audience. So we have 5 panelists and a moderator. The first panelist is Mr. Sudhir Singh Chauhan, who is an urban planner with a background in civil engineering and an MBA. He has 31 years of experience, which include a wide range of works related to designing, execution of building construction work, preparation of development plans, town planning schemes, and planning of residential as well as industrial sectors. He has held important positions such as Senior Town Planner in the Municipal Corporation of Gurugram and Department of Town and Country Planning Gurugram, apart from positions in the Haryana State Industrial Infrastructure Development Corporation. Welcome to the event. We look forward to hearing your perspective. The second panelist is Mr. Abhi Bhasin. Abhi is a transport economist and is an expert on economic appraisal and financial evaluations of infrastructure schemes. He has done extensive work on road, rail, water, and air projects worldwide. He has conducted studies for OSAID, ADAPT, ADB, DFID, European Union, World Bank, UNDP, and USAID funded projects, to name a few. He has more than 20 years of experience in carrying out cost-benefit analysis, due diligence work, economic policies, PPP projects in UK and other emerging economies. Geographical experiences include projects in Europe, Central Asia, East Asia and Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean, in addition to Middle East, Africa, and South Asia, including India, obviously. The third panelist this afternoon is Mr. Shailendra Kaushik. Shailendra has got specialized knowledge in cities and mobility projects, preparation of master plans, complex project financing transactions, procurement of smart technologies in the area of mobility management. Currently, he's based in Dubai and working as a consultant on future cities and sustainable mobility projects globally. He has more than 20 years of experience in urban and transport sector advisory across Asia, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America, as well as Pacific region. He was an expert international advisor on UN Habitat Report on Global Urban Mobility and is an expert member of ITE USA International Committee on Transport Infrastructure and Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Shailendra has co-founded Cities Forum at University of Oxford, UK in 2018. The fourth panelist is Mr. Amit Bhatt, who is currently the Executive Director, Integrated Transport at World Resource Institute, its India office. Amit provides vision and leadership to all transport initiatives across WRI India Sustainable Cities Program. As a transport planner by training, he has more than 15 years of experience. He has also a background qualification in architecture and specialization in transport economics. Amit works closely with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. He works also with various businesses as well and grassroots level organizations and civil society initiatives such as Rahagiri and Baskaro. He had been working with various international organizations, namely British High Commission, UNDP, World Bank, and has successfully handled transport projects like BRTS, IPTS, public road safety, city bus services, comprehensive mobility plans for a large number of Indian cities, including Gurugram. Welcome, Amit. We have the fifth panelist, Gaurav Jaisinghania. Gaurav is currently a principal consultant at PwC India. He is an urban planner and alumnus of IIM Lucknow with nearly 10 years of multi-country transactional experience in smart cities, policy and governance, urban transformation, user experience-based designing, strategic planning, research, benchmarking, and management consulting. Gaurav has extensive experience in developing smart city proposals, formation of vision, mission, principles, strategic KPI for different cities, developing land use plans, drafting comprehensive development plans, comprehensive mobility plans, housing for all of action, slum-free city for a plan of action, and report appraisals of Amrit, to name a few. He had also led the delivery of various consulting engagements in India, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Australia, UAE, Jamaica, and West African countries. Gaurav is also involved with G20 as advisor at Urban 20. Now let me also introduce the moderator for this afternoon session. Kankan Kataria is the program director of M.Plan programs in transport planning as well as urban planning at Sushant School of Planning and Development. She has nearly 20 years of experience in urban planning, working with private consulting names DHV Netherlands, Mott MacDonald, and IPE. She has worked as consultant for government organizations such as NCR Planning Board, HUDCO, Haryana Institute of Public Administration, National Institute of Urban Affairs, as well as non-governmental organizations. She has undertaken planning research projects for many international funding organizations, including the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, USAID, JICA, DFID, and OSAID. Kankan has also been providing training to urban planning and development officials of Haryana and has conducted many capacity building programs for ward councillors and women representatives in urban local bodies in the states of Punjab, Haryana, and Uttarakhand. She has been part of Sushant School since 2015. So, once again, a warm welcome to all of you and to the moderator and the audience who are invisible to all of us. Thank you for joining us, and I'll now hand over the session to Kankan for conducting and moderating. Thank you. Look forward to listening to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining for the discussion on unlocking transport systems in urban areas amid COVID-19, a very, very pertinent topic in today's time, that which concerns all of us. So as the panel moderator, I will be guiding us through the process. We have a short period of time, only an hour or 15 minutes more. So we will be going to break this into four distinct chunks. We want to appreciate impact of COVID on cities and mobility. So we'll start from there. Then we'll go on to exploring possible ways to rebuild resilient cities and safe and sustainable mobility. We will wrap up with the final takeaways from each of the panelists, followed by question and answers from the audience. So this will be the flow. Just beginning with the topic and what is the background thought behind. So with the onset of pandemic, there are various dynamic and interrelated forces at play. And there are various opinions on the ideal duration of the lockdown and ways to unlock systems. This is not an earthquake which happened and will get over with, but carries a perennial fear of infection all through and for a long time. So although options like work from home, e-offices, flexible or staggered working hours, rosters of workers on alternate days, all these are becoming new way of life. Yet we cannot completely get over with travel. So transport services are essential to keep the cities and our lives running. This calls for a calibrated decision on how to enable safe movement of people and goods, especially in urban areas, because urban travel alone constitutes more than 60% of the total travel globally. I'm sure my panelists will agree on this, and perhaps they'll have the latest statistics on this. Now, the big question is how to restore this quantum of travel amid COVID. The COVID is ongoing, so how to really work around the travels and transport systems. So to deliberate on this, we have with us distinguished panel of experts, Ajit has already introduced, from across the globe, who have diverse experiences in urban planning and transport planning, and will provide insights on two important aspects, as I shared. One is the impact, and second is the possible potential or opportunities to rebuild our urban areas as resilient and sustainable habitats by strengthening the mobility and transport systems. Each of the panelists is an expert in specific areas, and we will try to gather as much understanding as possible from them and achieve clarity on what is known versus what is merely a speculation or even exaggeration. So thank you, panelists, for accommodating your time for this event amidst all your really tight schedules. I know what you have been juggling around and what you still have in place in the platter today. And you're coming from different time zones, some of you, especially Abhi Basin, who's joining us from London right now, and Mr. Shailendra Kaushik, who has joined us from Dubai. So not taking more time, I would like to begin with Mr. Chauhan, who has held responsible positions with Government of Haryana for more than 3 decades and has profound experience in town planning assessments and preparations of development plans for the state of Haryana. Mr. Chauhan, would like to hear from you that in current times, how according to you are the cities impacted? what are the short or medium or long-term consequences of pandemic on our cities? Would you like to share in context of Haryana state?
Thank you very much, Kankan, and all the panelists to give me an opportunity to speak over some with you learned people who are from London and faraway places. And this is the beauty of the webinars कि we can arrange the people across the global. And the cities के बारे में still this COVID-19 is still new to us, and we are learning from our experience day by day. You are learning it that earlier it was the spread was very much low, then the spread is very much high, and then we are controlling the peoples, and the peoples are getting cured, some by themselves only and some by using some medicine or something like that. So it is still a strange to the peoples till the medicine is not found correctly and invented and tested. We cannot say ki how the COVID is going to affect our life in not, although it is very true that the world is now have to be prepared for the new normals. And in new normals, we are having so many things. Ki the life pattern has been changed, the food habit is going to be changed, the meeting places is going to be changed, the life is going to change altogether, and so that the planning principles also.
Right. So, what is the impact you feel is going to be on the intercity travel? If specifically we talk about state of Haryana, say from
Yeah,
Gurgaon to Sonipat or Delhi.
the worst effect sector in these cases is the transportation. And you see the people don't want to be go out of the house, they have to be stay in the house, the people like it also, and they are advised also to be in house only. So that's where the transportation system is have to be changed a lot. The proper distances is to be maintained in that, then the number of seats will be going to be less. And when you know that we are having a very much high population, and the already the transport system under the heavy loads, so it need to be increase the number of vehicles to ferry the peoples. So this is the main thrust on the government ki number of ferry, number of times to be increased by the vehicles, sitting capacities to be changed, and some new normal is to be adopted in that capacity. And certainly interstate or intercity to travel, it is going to be a bit less. It is not frequent as this was earlier, because people are provocating to move work from the home. So this is going to be change the scenario in transport system.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chauhan. So I would like to take it forward from state to coming into intra-city mobility, and I would take it to Mr. Amit Bhatt. Mr. Bhatt, you have been providing vision and leadership in initiatives on sustainable cities, and particularly for sustainable transport systems and functionality of integrated transport systems for mass travel as well as active mobility. So, what, according to you, is the impact of COVID on these transport systems and the travel patterns? Do you think that the travel demand is likely to get impacted as a result of COVID?
No, absolutely. And I think if you look at the ongoing COVID crisis, I think the maximum impact to any sector which has seen is the sector of transportation. And the reasons are pretty clear, right? So before we get into the reason, I think first we have to understand that about 85% of all passenger demand, whether you take road-based, rail, inland water transport, or even aviation, 85% of passenger demand happens through road-based systems. And within that road-based system, another 85% is being done by buses in terms of passenger kilometers. Now, what has happened is that, one, there is definitely a fear of contamination. And so that fear of contamination, along with the ongoing kind of the, the impact on how the virus has been spreading, has really done two things. One, it has kind of led to the lockdown in multiple cities and across the country. But because of this, there is a huge decrease in the demand of shared transport. Now, whether it is a kind of Ubers and Olas of the world, or buses or metro. And so these systems have come to an halt. Now, some of the preliminary estimates suggest that bus transport sector alone is going to lose somewhere around 1.5 lakh crore in 2020 due to no and low ridership. And that's a phenomenal impact on a sector which provides direct employment to about 75 lakh people, and another 1.5 crore people are involved indirectly. So I think one is this. The second is also, I think the new normal is still the second step. The first step to me is, after the lockdown, there is a recovery phase. and then comes the new normal. So new normal is the life after COVID. And currently we don't have a cure or a vaccine for COVID. So we don't know what will be the life after COVID. But what we need is currently life with COVID. And that's where we are. So as the cities are moving from the lockdown to the recovery phase, and mind you, these are not new normal. This is the recovery phase. How do we provide transport? And I think this is a very fundamental question, because if you look at the way cities move, private transport is still minority. I mean, even in a city like Gurugram, car-based transport is around 15-16%. The rest is either through walking, cycling, shared transport, or two-wheelers. Now, how do you then provide transport to masses where you have the concept of social distancing? Now, a bus which carries 80 to 100 passengers in peak hour is now carrying 20 passengers. So how do you augment that demand? I think that's very important. So I think I'll stop here, but the point I'm trying to make is we have to start reimagining transport system, because these are different times, and different times really call for different kind of thinking and solutions.
Right. Yeah. And what do you think are going to be the constraints for the mobility providers in such a scenario? Back to you, Amit. I think I've lost it. Okay, we'll get back to Amit again on this. We'll just move forward for the moment. Now, during this pandemic, even local area planning and governance of cities and transport systems is equally a huge, they're facing a huge crisis in terms of manageability and capacity building. So I'll take it up with Mr. Gaurav Jaisinghania. Gaurav, you are working with a renowned advisory firm. You've had transnational experience in smart cities, policy governance for so many countries, including Middle East, Asia, Africa. You're also working very closely with Government of India, Ministry, and governments of various states of India. So could you share your perspective on the impact of pandemic on local area planning and national level governance, especially with change in travel patterns by the individuals within cities and rural areas and cities or metropolitan regions? You're on mute, Mr. Gaurav. Thanks.
Yeah. I was saying that's a very valid point. I think before we look at the governance, there's a larger impact on the way users are behaving. So the preference for people have moved to personal mode of transport. There's a lot of pressure that we are expecting, which will be created on the traffic conditions and the road infrastructure. People have started adjusting to the new normal of working from home. So even things are normal. Even when things are normal, it is expected that the ridership is going to be down by 35 to 40% against what it was in December 2019. Apart from, I think when we look at it from the urban planning perspective, apart from focusing, we have to also see how connected comprehensive neighborhoods can be created. While the planning is being done at zonal level and town level, as Chauhan sir was mentioning, governments and experts will have to work together to invest into innovative ways of planning. Let's say 5, 10, 15 principle. So what 5, 10, 15 principle we do is everything that is required daily should be in 5 minutes walk. Everything that is required probably once a week should be just 10 minutes away from your house, and things which are non-essential, probably you would use it once a month, should be within 15 minutes of reach. So we will have to turn around the way we have been looking at the town plan, the urban planning. Also, we will have to, as Amit was focusing on the sustainable transport, I think we also have to look at non-motorized transport. So there's larger impact that people will prefer using an MT at a neighborhood or a commune level. even governments will have now have a little pressure on creating this kind of infrastructure which can cater pedestrians or bicyclists and people like that. I think also we before we look, on the governance piece, we also need to see the kind of impact that operators have. Uh, many of the operators were already cash strapped, and now with the current situation, there's a lot of financial distress. There's fare box revenues have there's a plummeting fare box revenues, and we need to see that significant there's significant fixed costs, which is asset repayments, rents, etc., while the ridership has gone down. Um, we need to see that there is a lot of impact on the informal transport providers, auto rickshaws, the normal taxis, and the cars that used to come on renting. So I think there's larger role that local governments have to play when it comes to comprehensive planning for the transportation system.
Right. Yeah. And please share your perspective even on international mobility, which used to happen for work or leisure.
Yeah. So I think I'm one of the users who is very much dependent on the international mobility. Uh, Let me tell you, air transport was one of the first and most affected sectors from the extended travel restrictions, and which will last for a few more months. It will take some time for them to return to the full operations. While the positive news for the air transport is that with the rise in e-commerce and e-delivery, airplanes have been moving around the world, from the logistics perspective. But I think when it comes to people and their mobility, new procedures will have to be laid down at the passport control, security scans, and within the airlines. I think it is more realistic to expect fewer flights with lower number of passengers and with high hygienic standards and procedures. In the current situation, with airlines already leaking money, I think transferring the burden of extra cost to passengers. So there are few factors that need to be looked upon, because we can expect that there might be some steep increase in airfares, as it makes it logical but it is not definitely a long term solution. So we'll have to comprehensively see through that one. For now, I think even the people who have developed their delivery centers in places like Dubai, India, and elsewhere, I think most of the sectors might be able to survive for a while now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gaurav. So another very crucial aspect of sustainability of cities and transport systems, not just otherwise, even during COVID, is economics. And we all are aware of the economic crisis that is happening. So it is also impacting the transport systems in the cities, livability. So to make any plan successful, of course, they need to see the light of the day. So project level planning and management becomes very critical. Projects need prioritization and evaluation. I would like to raise this with Mr. Abhi Basil. Abhi, you are an expert in transport economics, and you've substantially carried out cost benefit analysis for transport projects across the globe for all kinds of economies. So I would like to understand from you, what is the impact and likely consequences on the economics of transport systems?
Right. Okay. Um, yeah. God. Look, I think we have to appreciate one thing, that we are. This is work in progress. We are still in middle of the pandemic. There's also high chance of second wave. So nothing is there in concrete. We are still observing. However, that doesn't mean that efforts haven't been made or are not being made. Uh, in general, whenever we talk about transport and the potential impacts of any pandemic or any other crisis, we have a standard economic impact assessment wherein we look for or look to assess your social impacts, or your environment impacts, or your economic impacts. So I know these are also covered in detail by my. Sorry, uh, the page reloaded. So sorry, I was talking about that. The standard impacts, which are social impacts or economic impacts or environmental impacts, which are needed to be seen. Now, what we've observed, apart from the reduction in accidents because there's less traffic or crashes, security is an issue. Accessibility is a big issue at the moment, and even reliability. You have the fleet ready, the operators are ready, but the drivers aren't there. Right. Then on economic side, there is no denial that at the moment demand has reduced, um, and therefore supply has also declined. Um, but going forward in 6 months' time, or when things become normal, um, we may have a different size. We may have a different fleet size. The frequency may vary. We may have a bigger size of fleet. For example, I think a few years back, certain countries went with A380s, whereas certain countries went with Dreamliner. We have certainly seen impacts on environment. I mean, I saw all these WhatsApp images that you can see Toronto from from a town in Punjab. So the air has improved without any doubt. Air has improved in China. Air has also improved in Delhi, I believe. Um, so these are certain microeconomic impacts which would now be seen, which previously may have been not assessed in a way that contributed more to choosing a project. The focus might have been mainly on the monetary side of things. What are the benefits? What are we getting back by investing a certain rupee or a certain dollar? What's the monetary beneficial to government? However, things are changing. So that's the microeconomic side of things, and then you certainly have macroeconomic impacts as well, wherein it is extremely important to now set out your policy, your strategy, and the plans. um, Pricing would have an impact. I'm sure you would have seen a certain increase in fuel cost. um, there was a dip, massive dip, but now the cost has increased. There will be issue on financing. However, there are opportunities as well. I can certainly remember.
We've lost it. Okay, I think we
Right,
can come
sorry,
back.
I'm back.
Yes.
The page is playing with us, but that's okay. Um, so anyway, we were talking about macroeconomic impacts. I won't. I'm quite wary of the time as well. But yes, I mean you have to look at pricing. You have to look at policy, strategy plans. You have to look at opportunities. I was about to give a quick example that how the countries have given these huge financial packages to businesses, but that have to be complemented along with certain investments on transport sector. Otherwise, it's no good. And those packages have to be concrete. There has to be. Right. I'm back. Again, we'll try this time. Yeah, we have these impacts on microeconomic, macroeconomic. But I think the message I want to give to the audience is, and you would probably see it very soon, that we've heard that travel is a derived demand. It's a byproduct of going to work, going to shop, except that if there's going to be leisure travel, or there's a Formula One racing, etc. But very soon you will realize that people will drive for leisure, because no one likes to be at home, constrained in a room. So even if work from home is there, you would see that the increase in private travel or leisure travel, people might just pick up their car and say, let's go for a 10-kilometer ride. You will see that. So I'm expecting that travel will increase, the leisure travel, and it may balance out at the end. You may not be traveling during work time, but you may be taking your car, say maybe at lunchtime. That okay, I'm going for a ride. That's one part of your question. And the other part being, I think you said potential impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other question which I want to put forth is, since you have worked for different kind of economies, now can you create a comparative for us to understand how is the impact showing in underdeveloped or developing or developed countries out of your experience?
Right. I think
Could you hear my question? Okay.
wow, wonders of internet. I got your
Could
question,
okay.
Kankan. The impacts, I think, detailed impacts, I think Shanendra is going to cover, so I'll let him cover on that. But I think we have three broad categories. We have impacts on users, we have impacts on operators.
You've again lost him.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we have impacts on users, operators, and regulators. I really want to highlight impacts on operators. Impacts on users, you will hear from Shalender. I mean, the impacts on demand, reduced for work trips. You've already discussed about it. And as I told you, I think there will be increase in social and leisure trips. But on operator side, it's extremely important. I think Mr. Chauhan touched it as well. Accessibility is the key. You have to make vehicle or travel option accessible. Crowd management, security, emergency. What happens if there's an emergency? Cleaning, hygiene, ventilation. I mean, these are certain factors which an operator cannot ignore, or he takes the risk of increasing the pandemic. Crowd management is, I mean, it's very close to my heart, especially after seeing the scenes near ISBT in Delhi. I think it was completely mismanaged. Anyway, on regulator side, compliance. So what if people are not complying? What will you do? What can you do? Exemptions. The exemptions are very critical. If people have to travel, then what do you do you cater for them, or do you ignore them? Regulations, and I mean, these would again fall under the umbrella of, again, policy, strategy, plan. At this point, it is absolutely critical that you have a policy which may be which has to be uh, you may have to change that. It need not be a fixed policy, because situations are changing so fast, you cannot imagine. One day, a certain study comes out and things change. Here in the UK, I remember 3 weeks back, they were saying that you don't need to wear masks. And last week, Mr. Johnson was promoting that you have to wear mask if you're traveling in public transport. So, and that brings us to discuss communication, which I think I'll cover in the later part of the section. Um, but please, operators have to take the plunge and be responsible.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Hussain, for sharing your views. So, Mr. Kaushik, I'm coming to you. You have been extensively into urban and transport sector advisory across Asia and all countries, Pacific region, Latin America, Africa, Europe, everywhere. So, what do you perceive as hindrances in unlocking transport systems?
Hi, thanks, Kankan. I think my fellow panelist has said many things, but I don't want to repeat those things. But
Yeah.
this is a pandemic which basically had united the entire world, if you look at it. So after the climate change, perhaps this is the first thing where every city, every country, every operator who is into transportation business, or maybe any company, they have one goal: to keep them
Right.
sustained, to keep them away from this pandemic in terms of their survival. So if you look at transportation area, there are three key things for any operator or for any city at this moment. One is that they have to make the city mobile. You have to make the city moving, because transportation is a key thing to make the economy moving. So you have to make the city moving. Second, if you look at it, at the same time, you need to contain the COVID-19 as well. And third is, with city moving, contain COVID-19, you also have to ensure that financial survival. So if you look at these three things, all three contradict with each other. If you have to keep city moving, you will have to ensure measures to contain COVID-19, which is social distancing, public hygiene, reduce demand. And if you have all those kind of things, the challenge is how to make the financial survival for these transport operators. So right now we are passing through a very, very challenging time. As Amit says, that what is new normal? The new normal is not known to anyone, because we are in the middle of pandemic. And as we survive in this particular period, we will have to see what the new normal will be. But at the same time, how to run the city is something very, very important. And one solution which basically, these private operator, if you look at Indian context, they are not very big private operator, having multi-billion dollar business, who can have enough cash to pump into that. So unless there is an intervention from the government for this interim period, this transportation market will be under stress. So a lot of sectors are getting bailout plan, and how the transportation fit within those sectors, because agriculture is under stress, aviation is under stress, manufacturing is under stress. So every sector is under stress. So we as fellow transport professionals, our idea is that transportation, as Abhi also said, is a derived demand. There is no demand without any activity. So for every sector to grow, whether it is agriculture or manufacturing or logistics, the government need to realize that they have to make investment into transportation during this interim period. Unless there is an investment made, things will go, further down below. As Amit says, that 1.5 lakh crore is the kind of losses for bus operators this year. It's a huge money. And as a result of 1.5 lakh crore, you look at the leveraging or the multiplying effect of that losses. So the how the entire economy will, the kind of number which we will be losing. We are talking about passenger, but at the same time, if you look at the goods, because here in Middle East, lot of impact on the goods travel, which is happening. And right now you will not see, but in the time to come, when there is a delay in commodity supply, you will see a lot of price increase for these commodity markets. So we have to look both sector, passenger as well as goods. And this is the high time that transportation need to get the right focus, which we were not getting earlier, in developing countries. Developed countries have got the system is already in place. So this is the time when government has to realize that unless they invest, unless they support the sector, economy will not come back to normal.
Right. Right. Thanks. You really made me ponder as well on this. Thank you. But I would also want you to share. You recently conducted, you spearheaded a global study on the impact of COVID-19 on cities and urban mobility, where you involved hundreds of practitioners, business leaders, policymakers, academics from all over the world to understand the likely disruptions. Would you like to talk about the findings of that global study that you conducted?
Yeah, I'm happy to note. I think this is the first public forum because the report was out yesterday only, where we are talking about this study. So, as Abhi says, transportation itself is no demand. You will have to look things into totality if in order to understand about the transportation. When you say totality, you need to look into land use, you need to look into economics, you need to look into human behavior, and then you try to understand what the problem is. And with all those things in mind, we had conducted this study, which basically, rather than going to a user, we have actually changed our methodology and we consulted the experienced professionals across the globe because there is not a consensus in terms of what should be done. So we thought that the ideal way that reach out to the practitioners, policymakers, these academicians, researchers, and get their views onto these complex topics. So we had this survey conducted across more than 47 countries in the globe with more than 600 professionals, participated in this survey and interesting findings. So this basically study has looked into a lot of issue. First thing I would like to say, one of the question in this study is that whether cities would make investment into digital infrastructure or transport infrastructure. And there was a unanimous consensus, yes, with working from home, people are seeing a lot of issues in digital connectivity. So that should also get a priority along with the transport connectivity. So as we have also seen a lot of issues, we sitting in London, but at the same time, this new kind of evolving normal has forced us to do certain things which on a long run would benefit to the society. This is what the practitioner said. So like one of the question, if I may, because I cannot run through the whole study, but the key things
Yes.
which has been actually one questions we ask in terms of how the work from home culture, whether this is something temporary or permanent in terms of having it for a longer period of time or just in the interim period of time. So 90% almost respondent says that work from home culture would be kind of a new normal, part of new normal. Then we took these findings to the industry. We took this finding to the Google and asked them that whether they are actually getting a lot of inquiries or what is a technology provider they think. So they say that work from home now not necessarily to wait end of COVID-19. It's already happening. They are getting a lot of inquiries. They're investing a lot on making those tools which would enable working from home, in terms of real. So they also expect that all those industry which does not need man input like construction or logistics, all those industries has got potential for moving into work from home. This only work from home, if it happens, it has got multiple impact. We went to Oxford University where we interviewed their professor who is working on this work from home for the last almost 10 years. So she said that every empirical evidence shows that if someone is working from home, they tend to stay away from the city. They always live outside the city in a smaller area. So they say with these empirical evidence, they also expect that a lot of people will move away from large metropolitan cities, and maybe these smaller cities or outside area would develop in a different manner, the way so what, like in case of Delhi, I was working in India some 15 years ago, so we had a concept of national capital region which is already there. So despite a lot of investment, we have not realized the potential of NCR. But now I believe that as a result of this COVID-19 new normal, these satellite towns which were earlier planned, some 10 or 15 towns, if companies would start moving, because if you look at it, a lot of commuters were actually traveling from Ghaziabad, from Gurugram, Faridabad to Delhi. But with new normal coming up, working from home, these intercity travel demand would likely to reduce. Okay, so this will not only be having impact on your transportation system, but land use also. So this study has actually tried to address different questions like how the development would look like, what are the short, medium, and long-term impact onto travel demand, what are the impact in terms of air travel demand. So another thing is that how the cities should actually gear up for new normal. So this is what we also asked and got some interesting findings. So I would encourage you to download the report. It's available on the website and read through that. And we participate, we actually welcome your input and comments onto that, because the next stage of research is to consult with these city authorities and come out that what can be done.
Thanks a lot, Shailendra. I think it's a very interesting study, and findings to dwell on the findings will be even more interesting. Well, first set of questions were around impact of COVID on city and mobility. Let's start to build on, is this, any catastrophe makes us to sit and think for a fundamental change in basic services and essential services. It creates scope for basic improvement, enables us to rethink policy, governance, finance for societal goals, as all of you have shared. So I would open this to you all, my panelists. What do you think are the possible ways to prepare for the lockdown now, and how to rebuild our cities and mobility? Is this at all an opportunity to plan and develop better than before? I'll open the question to Mr. Chauhan first. You have been a very integral part of Institute of Town Planners India as well, and you're connected very closely to the town planning fraternity across all states of India. So, are you contemplating any new norms for planning and development? Uh,
Yes, you are absolutely right. Although we are in the crawling stage of pandemic, बहुत कुछ learn करना है. We have to understand a lot about it. Even though we are preparing for that, because planner have to be get the guns first. So we are recommending the recommendation for the UDFA guidelines to make the city more resilient. Because in planning point of view, say now the more thrust on the city resilient. The city should be think like a planet.
yes.
Then it could be a resilient city. So we have to make the city more resilient, and for that we have to be recommend the UDFA guidelines to be made some changes in that. At the same time, the model building bylaws also going to be some changes in that, because now we require more broader the balconies, because we cannot move out, so we have to be stay in our balconies. So the balconies have some broader these things, and the areas which we require, which is separated. Although it is a debate कि we should be go for the larger cities or we go for the medium cities, because at the work from home is the norm of the new norms. So then will be new normals where you will see that the workplaces are going to be changed. So the distance doesn't matter. It is also going to be in that. So the planning point of view, say the institution of town planners, we are having so many seminars over it. It is a transportation or post-pandemic building bylaws or life or everything we are considering on that, and we are thinking the city is having the leadership and strategy banani padti. The leadership should be very good in that. Then health and well-being. Nowadays we require the more health centers, more health equipment. So that's why the health and well-being is the part of that. Then economy and society. This is very important. We are saying there's a PM was saying that ki Jaan and Jahan both we require is that. तो जान के बाद में अब जहान की बारी, तो दैट वे वी हैव टू बी हेल्थ एंड वेलिंग भी चाहिए, देन इकोनॉमी में भी चाहिए, सोसाइटी को भी हमारे को साथ रखनी भी चाहिए. देन द कम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड एनवायरनमेंट, दे आल्सो कम हैंड टू हैंड. So these all planning strategies are going on, and the planners thinking on that, and the recommendation are sending to the UDFA, and the model building plans is going to be changed. As simple example, we require the broader balconies, the separate areas to be there. The gate should not be together. Now we think that all 4 flats opening on a one platform. They may be opening on a different platform. So this new normal is certainly going to change our life. As you said, from transport and I think we are having the next question. So I think this has answered properly. Planning we are changing.
Yeah. So, any interventions towards migrant population and urban poor of the city? Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
absolutely. This is the thing which is we are not considering planning very much on that point, because government schemes come in that. Even though we are having only EWS housing, mostly we are having that some place there should be for the EWS housing, but the government is planning on their own. We are having the industrial housing nearby the industries only. This is the step only we can take. That labor should not be come from very outskirt or some very far away places. They should be stay where the industry is there, where the need is there. So that is the planning point of view. We should given a we should call to the industrial. They should have a industrial housing within their industrial campus, so that distances become ho jaye. Then we require some more schools nearby and the health facilities nearby. So these will be the new normal. Industrial area and those all should be in the walking distance only. That is to be taken care in that.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chauhan. Amit, I'll take a few questions on you for thinking ahead, visioning ahead for the ongoing life around COVID. So, what do you think can be the possible sustainable practices now, and sustainable transport modes, and how they can be integrated?
So I think fantastic question, Kankan. I think one, we have to remember that health and diseases have often shaped our cities. Whether it's the Metropolitan Board of Works and sanitation system, which came in London because of the mid 19th century cholera outbreak, or even we look at how kind of New York turned up because of the Spanish flu, or back home, or even how our city of Surat shaped up after the plague hit the city in the mid 1990s. So I think so that's very important, and to me that's the reason why I think the COVID is going to impact our cities. And Mr. Chauhan was talking about resilience. I think the resilience is much more needed in the transport space. So I'll tell you why I think so. So I mean, if you look at the way currently our cities, Gurugram is no exception, are designing our transport system is thinking everybody moves on car and that to bigger cars. So you have more roads, wide roads, more flyovers. And the result is that even with 15, 16% population, you design 99% of the infrastructure for these minority users. And so when anything happens, the city comes to a grinding halt. And therefore, I think it's important to reimagine the transport paradigm in our cities. And that's where I think we have to look at 5 steps. One, I think we have to believe in shared transport, because there is no empirical data, even in the COVID crisis, which says that the public transport or mass transit has aided in any ways COVID spread. So I think there is a lot of paranoia, but then there is no data to kind of show. So I think we have to rely on walking, cycling, and shared transport as the core of our belief. So that's point number one. Point number two, we have to operate services. So because of the lockdown, cities have reduced public transport operation. The result is now there is overcrowding happening. So I think one way to enforce social distancing is by increasing higher frequency and adding more buses onto the system. So operation becomes point number two. Point number three, I think we have to improve, because we cannot have, for example, Mumbai, which runs suburban services at an unimaginable density of 14 to 15 passenger per square meter. I think that's not a way to transport people. We have to transport people in a slightly more nicer way, which means how do you operate at a good occupancy level is something to be looked at. Fourth, I think support. We have to support public transport system. And I said 1.5 lakh crore is the loss that is expected. And there is no way we can get around if we don't support public transport system. And third and fifth, to me, is an important aspect of communicate. I think if cities can develop something, and I've been talking about it a lot, is some kind of standard operating procedure on how do you treat public transport in the COVID crisis. So if you have something like a COVID labeling program, where you give a label, like you have pollution under control certificate, mass transit, public transit, shared mobility operators can put the certificate provided they follow certain protocols. So these types of communication measures, I think, will definitely reinstall faith in the minds of people who are dependent on basically this mode of transportation. But I think in the end, I would say public transport, walking and cycling is the lifeline of our city. And if you look at historically Indian cities were designed for community living and shared mobility. And that's the mantra for sustainable city. So while COVID, maybe once we get an injection or a vaccine in a year's time or in 18 months, we will get over the COVID crisis. But that doesn't mean we should not plan our city in a sustainable manner. So sustainability is a bigger battle to fight, I think, and that's where COVID becomes the trigger to look at sustainability in a right manner.
Right. Thanks, Amit, for reinforcing this again with all of us and on the audience, everyone. Abhi, I would take this question with you now. Amid tight fiscal budgets, what changes can we expect in project prioritization and evaluation frameworks?
Look,
And how is it happening across the globe now? If you can throw some light, and
yeah,
what can be adopted in Indian conditions?
okay, okay, all right, okay. You've asked me too many questions. Okay,
I'll repeat.
um, right. I traditionally transport projects, they've been categorized under projects which are, say, which are transport led, or development led. When I say development led, if the, for example, the residential or the housing is coming up somewhere, or any businesses are coming up there, so transport projects are related with those developments. But very soon you would see, which I've also hinted before, that health-led projects would be there. Um, in terms of project prioritization, I mean, I can give you examples that the UK government last week, or I think a couple of weeks back, when they announced unlocking, they have given £2 billion, or they have placed a pot of £2 billion, wherein they are asking the counties, or let's say in Indian context, the states, that here is a pot of money. Please come and invest for your sustainable transport schemes. That's one side of that. Um, Obviously, states have to bid for that money, but that pot is there. Um, I'm also aware that the government is very soon going to announce another pot of money, wherein they are saying that we have to kickstart economy now. And I think either Gaurav hinted that, or Amit hinted that. I don't remember. But to kickstart economy, transport is a key investment. So here is an option, at least here, where they are saying that here's a pot of money. Please tell us where you can invest. They want people to move. However, which I think no one would have imagined. For example, I want to really give this example here in the UK's context. Everyone must have heard of London congestion charging, and that was to encourage people not bringing in their cars, but travel on public transport. So until a few weeks back, the advice that to people, to commuters, that please use cars, don't use public transport, please use cycles, please use public transport for limited trips and then walk. So things are changing at very, very fast pace. However, prioritization cannot happen without the funding pot. So the funding pots have to come from the state government, from the national government, and also, I believe, from your institutional finances, which are like your World Banks, or your Asian Development Banks, or your AFD, or your UNDP. They have the pots available, but they have to make them available for the projects now. Now is the need. I mean, wherever there are tsunamis and other catastrophic emergencies, the pots are made available. And I think that now is the time for all these institutions to offer those pots. And prioritization can or should happen in terms of safeguarding operators, safer travels, and as I mentioned, to develop so-called your electric corridors, where you can have electric taxis, and other sustainable measures on walking and cycling routes. In terms of how certain aspects can be adapted to Indian conditions, I think transport won't come on its own, Kankan. There are a few other issues that need to be addressed, including, for example, communication. Communication has to be really strong, sort of tool that has to be used to to have a positive impact on travel and transport in Indian context.
Right. Right.
Did I miss anything?
No,
Did
no.
you ask me 2, 3 questions? So,
No, no. In interest of time, I can understand this much for now. We'll get back to you for more.
yeah.
Thank you, really. Gaurav, so our speakers have been talking about financial capacities and financial support from government organizations. What are your views on ways to, build governance and financial capacities of institutions, and how governments may change their approach towards this condition? Could you take it up? My question is to Gaurav. Gaurav, you're on mute.
That's a very nice question. So, as I was mentioning before, there's a possibility that there will be greater financial impact once the new normal is in place on the fleet size vis-a-vis the cost of operations remaining same. Because if you see the guidelines of social distancing and the new norms of safety uh, and don't go along well with the mass transit. So I think we will have to look at how government will have to look how people are moving into the metros. There will be new set of policies, regulations, operating procedures that will have to be put in place by the government. There'll have to be larger recovery measures, as Abhi was mentioning. Government will have to funnel in some money from either IDAs or from their own sources or from the state governments to make it feasible for operators and the SPVs to continue with their operations.
Yeah.
I think what also we can you know see is that government will have to invest into fleet upgrade programs where there is more reliance on the e-buses. And gaining back from the point that I mentioned on the auto rickshaws and informal transport, I think there is an option of looking at a holistic approach of including these informal transport, rental bikes, everything under the purview of urban public transport. It's happening in some of the cities in our country. Bhopal is one of the examples. Indore is another one. But I think we'll have to look at the larger perspective from the country. Yeah, level. Operationally, governments will have to look at the conventional options also to manage the traffic. Let's say if um, there is more inclination towards personal transport and there's pressure on the streets, I think there'll have to be a alternate measure to manage the traffic. Various city transport corporation and SPVs will have to uh, develop new set of standard operating procedures for the buses, the BRT and everything. Frequent cleaning and disinfection will have to happen. Passenger boarding, deboarding patterns will have to be minimized to remove the bottlenecks at the turnstiles, platforms, bus stops, etc. There will have to be, like Amit was mentioning, 90% of uh, our fleet is on the light transit like buses and everything, and including other forms of public transport. The service schedules will have to be uh, managed, adjusted. And last, I think governments will have to look at the contractual arrangements as well with the operators, because I think it's our responsibility to help mitigate this financial crisis if there's so.
Right. Yeah. Gaurav, you've also been very instrumental in Smart Cities mission. And so, what do you think is going to be the role of technology? I quickly want to get touched on this also, because with
Sure.
IoT and everything now. Yeah.
Yes, right. So again, pressing upon Amit's point, we will have to we will have to put people's trust in public transport, and technology can play an important role in it. Transport systems will have to rely on digital platforms to probably help locate potentially contagious individuals and those in contact with them. Plus, we will have to also look at options like pre-reservations, pre-trip reservations, and voluntary onboard checks, QR codes on the buses, so that we know who was traveling on what system. Uh, I think that will be important. It will help. Uh, it will play a vital role in gaining passengers' trust again. Ticketless transit, multimodal cards. We do have metro cards in Delhi and other cities, but I think we'll have to look at multimodal cards so that everything is ticketless, cashless, and there's no exchange of paper between people. From the traffic aspect, I think emerging technologies, AI, machine learning will plus the IoT will help redefine the intelligent adaptive traffic management system. And I think also it would also so the AI ML different aspect of it will also help understand the travel behaviors of people. So this will help us in better planning for the future.
Right. Thanks a lot, Gaurav. Shailendra, although we are, of course, understanding a lot from all the speakers, but yes, from you as well, I would want to know how are the cities globally getting prepared for this set of new normal, and what is that India can do? What Indian cities, what preparedness do we should be having, for our Indian cities? Can you quickly just about talk about this?
Yeah, I'll not take much time, as my fellow panelist has, said in terms of what could be done. But what we are seeing now, we are entering into the age of agility mobility, agile mobility, wherein we need to build in resilience planning, we need to build in agility planning in our mobility management. If you look at right now, we are already seeing lot of contactless deliveries are happening, contactless payments are happening, protected rides are happening, use of micro mobility mode is getting promoted in various cities. So what I'm seeing in terms of most of the cities, whether you call it in Europe or in Middle Eastern region, the authorities have started building in the resilience part in the mobility sector. Like as the fellow panelists said, that we need to have a SOPs for public transportation. So you need to have SOPs for all the the services, and then transportation is gradually emerging as a mobility as a service. The productization of transportation is happening now. So the mobility service is kind of a product which would be sold in the market based on certain KPIs a user can actually see. So this we will see a lot of investment would happen in terms of technology intervention into the way public transport being operated. A lot of things are saying that public transport is under stress. So apart from getting the funding from government or from other sources, we also need to see that how we can reduce on the cost. The cost side, there are a lot of efficiencies which need to be built in, whether you call it operational efficiencies or you call it financial efficiencies. So in those areas, these can be achieved by implementing a lot of technology tools which are already there in the market, which authorities were kind of shy away in using those. So we are seeing in Middle Eastern cities that authorities are gearing up to equip the buses with a lot of technology intervention in terms of the smart thermometer, the face scanning, and other things, which basically each individual can be identified based on his record. So that is what is happening, and ultimately these things would actually, we did not look, or we do not look into the transportation perspective, but this would actually improve the overall safety and security within our city ecosystem.
Right. Thanks a lot, Shailendra. So now I would like to put one question to our esteemed audience. Would like to hear from everyone your thoughts on this question. Could the reduced car travel or the reduced traffic volume provide opportunities to make changes to our roads, our transit systems, without having to tap, any major capital or investment? Please share your comments in the chat room. Thank you so much. So we are getting close to the end of our time together. And if there is one thing that you would like to, like the audience to take away from this session and use for public benefit and utility, what would that be? I would put this to all my panelists. I would start with Mr. Chauhan again. One thing that you would like, the panelists, the audience to take away. You're on mute, sir. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, right. I just said that the all panelists are very good. I cannot say who is much
No,
better,
no.
but Sabhi for the Chete, Mr. Kaushik and Mr. Gaurav and Amit, all we contributed a lot on that. And
Right,
just that everybody should be safe now because now the pandemic is not open up. We don't know much about it and it is crawling now. So we have to take the precautions and think in the mind ki what could be next, but we don't know ki what is the next. So, but
right,
we have to plan for everything in that form. Ki, as on today, the circular is coming that ki the safe distancing and separating is the only measure we are having in ourselves, and that had to be reflected in the transport system, in the planning system, and in our lifestyle also. That is
right.
that.
Thanks, Mr. Chauhan. Shailendra, any final word for the audience to take away?
Yeah, Kankan, I can say that this is an opportunity for our city and mobility sector to re-emerge in terms of what the inefficiencies were there, promote what India was good at it earlier. If you look at Indian cities, those were kind of, look at Jaipur, 15-minute kind of city. The concept which is getting promoted in European cities or in Latin American cities like 15-minute cities. So we earlier in terms of Indian cities were actually 15-minute cities. So those kind of city planning principles which somehow we lost over 200 300 years has to come back. We have to
Right,
make our neighborhoods mixed use, which was earlier there. If you look at Indian cities of Jaipur or Udaipur, so these mixed use neighborhoods were already there, where you can have business on the ground floor and residence on the top floor. So we have to look into those old planning principles and start implementing or start reinventing, not necessarily reinventing, but we have to implement those planning principles into our city and mobility practice. Opportunity is there to reimagine to our city, so it should not be wasted. So this is what I can say.
right. Thanks, Shailendra. Abhi, would you like to give one last word to the audience?
Yeah, I think couple of things. One is, as I mentioned, communication, especially for pandemic or any catastrophic emergency. Communication. It has to be a very strong communication. The message should be absolutely clear what needs to be done. This is for safer travel and also for safety of everyone else who may not be traveling. That's one. I also want to highlight investment is the other key. Without investment, it's going to be quite challenging. And third, which I think most of the project, at least when I dealt in India or in certain countries, that we do not assess risks. Risks are extremely important thing to address. So at macro level, you have catastrophic risk, which may be probability may be less, but impact may be high. And then you have micro level risk, thinking what
Right,
can go wrong. So
right.
these three messages.
Thanks, Abhi. Over to you, Amit. One final word for the audience.
No, absolutely. I think one within all that, that cases, the deaths, and all that. So that's one side of the COVID. The other side of the COVID is also clean air, blue sky. I mean, we are seeing blue sky for such a sustained spell in last 10, 15 years. So I think the question for us is how do you preserve the benefits of this COVID crisis and plan cities better? That's a big opportunity for us. So I totally agree with Shailen. It's an opportunity for us to plan our cities right.
Right. Thank you, Amit. Over to you, Gaurav, for the final word. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. So before I conclude, I just saw a question from one of the audience on the live chat, which says people said there will be more demand for cars, but we are only seeing a decline. I am from the automobile sector and facing issues. Can Mr. Gaurav please answer? Yeah, I think thanks for that question, Ms. Maurya. What I was mentioning is there might be impact on, or there might be pressure on the personal transport, means of transport. But as of now, the cities are still under lockdown. We are still facing the pandemic quarantine. Once the new normal is in place and nobody knows what the new normal would be, I think in cities where public transport is not very efficient, people will uh, uh, choose for personal transport for a while. And my I think message otherwise is I think people should um, definitely look towards using alternative modes of transport like walking, bicycling for small distances. When I was talking about 5, 10, 15 principle. So I think for small distances, we should focus more on the non-motorized transport. For the government, I think governments will have to, as Abhi was mentioning, there is a lot of financial burden that governments will have, and governments will have to invest into it. Governments should also, at the local governance level, government should also see how we can help citizens adapt non-motorized transport or public transport, and how we can use technology to gain people's trust back into public transport through pre-bookings and self check-ins, ticketless. Uh, I think we should finally the steps that we have taken forward should not or the steps that we will take forward should not lead us to abandoning our vision for future. It has taken a long number of years uh, to to engage people and divert people towards sustainability. So I think there's a lot of effort. The goals we have set for the environment by transforming global mobility into a green, secure, and connected ecosystem. I think we should enforce this more than ever, finding a new balance without shifting the focus.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you so much, Gaurav. So, thank you, dear panelists. It was a great. It was wonderful to hear your perspectives. Really appreciate all of that. Who knows how long this will go on, but hoping to make some good out of this, which otherwise may not come out. So, on that note, we come to the end of this discussion. Thank you, panelists, for your wholehearted participation and your time. It has been indeed a very meaningful deliberation. I'm enriched, and I'm sure our viewers too would have gained from today's discussion. The questions are now open from the audience if there are any. The session is open for that. In case, so I think I'll just hand it over to Dr. Ajit, my colleague. Um,
Okay, so there are not too many questions. I think people have made some comments, but not too many questions. But there is one directly for Amit. Of course, Gaurav answered the question that was asked to him. Amit, you are being probed about the inclusive transportation. So maybe you can respond on that. So the question, if you want me to read, I'll tell. What is your take on the inclusive transportation? How new norms could be defined for shared transportation system? Let it be BRTS, MRTS, or aggregators like Ola, Uber. Furthermore, who will enforce it amid rising cases of COVID? So it's a nicely packed one for you.
No, absolutely. And I think some of it was also mentioned by fellow panelists. I think one we have to understand is uh, if we are thinking that everyone in our cities will get his or her personal motor vehicle and start going to their offices or schools, one, it is not technically possible because we don't have that much space to accommodate motor vehicles. Secondly, it's not even financially possible because not everyone can afford car or two-wheeler. So I think that's one you have to understand that it's not possible. Now the question then becomes, how do we provide mobility to people in a safe manner? And that's where one is, how do you make vehicles safe, which is by developing some kind of standard operating procedures which agencies follow for safe mobility. Second, how do you reduce demand on mass transit system? One, by augmenting services, but also reimagining the role of walking and cycling. I mean, majority of our trips in our cities are less than 5 kilometers. But walking for a kilometer or 2 kilometers is not possible in most cities, not because of the weather, but because of the so unsafe infrastructure we have. So this is the time where globally cities are trying to reimagine their transport system by promoting walking and cycling. Why can't we do the same? And incidentally, our cities were very much walkable and cyclable till 15, 20 years back when the automobile came and hit our cities hard. All the great principles that we talk about sustainability, be it mixed use, mixed income, walkable cities, were all there in our traditional towns and cities, as Shailendra mentioned. So I think it's time to reimagine, look back our past, and relook at some of the modes of transport like walking and cycling, and give them their due respect. We will see a dramatic change in our cities.
Thank you for that response. There is one question which I guess Abhi has responded, but just opening it up if anyone else want to respond to that. What's your take on norms that can be defined for companies like Rapido, Boundshare, Zoom Card, etc.? Does anyone in the panel want to respond?
Sure.
I think, yeah, I mean, again, this is a question how operators are going to help the users. Throughout the discussion, I have highlighted quite a lot on operators. So for the operators, it's operators' responsibility to make it safe for users to use the cars, whether it is to do with hygiene or cleaning. It's operators' responsibility. It's also the user's responsibility, so that they leave it clean for the next user. Here in the UK, I would assume that policy is there in India as well. For Uber ride, you cannot take a Uber ride if you are not wearing a mask. Also, the Uber car driver has to insert the screens, which may be of plastic, uh, so that um, the if there are two users using the same car, they are sitting at a considerable sort of distance between the two, and that there is some distance between the driver and the user of the car. So the responsibility lies mainly with the operators, but the users also have to be responsible.
Thank you for that. I think, but she would have some questions to Gaurav probably. The question is probably directed to Gaurav. Would you want to quickly respond? I think maybe there are some points that you mentioned has attracted this question. If you have any points, you could respond.
Yeah, I think this question, since it comes to me, I think it has been derived from things that I said, that uh, the informal set of transport, informal sector that was supporting the whole mobility, which is the rental cars, auto rickshaws, and all. So even Zoom cars for mobility between the cities. I think these will have to be brought under the purview of public transport, urban public transport, apart from the micro level norms that Abhi was mentioning. That there have to be some procedures, cleaning procedures. There have to be the seating procedures as well. Plus, having those screens, and so in addition to that, I think there's a lot of responsibility that lies with government to standardize the kind of initiatives that these kind of companies would take at a standard level, at a basically same set of.
All right. Um, I think the session was quite richer. I don't. I mean, you probably have given range of ideas and thoughts, and they were well lit. I think the audience is quite happy. They are not really probing you further. It only tells that it was well lit and debated session. And thank you for that. Before I hand it over to my colleague for formal vote of thanks and summarizing and conclusion, I would just want to kind of tell you what I picked up from this session. So all these ideas that you talked about, using this as a learning opportunity that reflect and move on as we reconfigure our transport systems is something which I picked up. Obviously, there are issues such as agility, intelligent systems, and also you mentioned about uh, assess the risk. I think it's quite important that we need to kind of understand the risk aspect in planning. And Mr. Chauhan mentioned about the very pleasant update that the planning institutions led by Institute of Town Planners as well as the state government of Haryana are looking at the prospect of updating and reforming the planning legislations and guidelines. That will be a very interesting and welcome move, and I think that will be a great learning for the planning fraternity. Obviously, crowd management, and also because we have to do physical distance, so crowd management is something which we need to look at. Abhi brought this point, and Gaurav interestingly brought the idea of the word trust. I heard him speaking. Yes, it's all about going to be trust. How do we rebuild trust? Because we have to maintain this physical distances. We have to work together. We can't remain indoors and remotely for long because there are challenges starting from very physical, personal health to the systems and aggregation process which builds cities. So very enriching session, and thank you all for your time. I'm not closing the session. My colleague will come back and have a formal conversation and then close the session. Thank you for your uh, time. I'm handing over to my colleague, Dr. Prabedi.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit. And I'd like to, it was a very, very enriching session, and I'd like to thank all the panelists, especially Mr. Sudhir Chauhan, Mr. Amit Bhatt, Mr. Gaurav Singh Jaisinghania, Mr. Shailendra Kaushik, and Mr. Abhimanyu Bhasin. Thanks a lot for joining in this session, which was hosted by us. And there are quite a few takeaways that were brought about and discussed in the discussion. I really like the point where Mr. Chauhan pointed out that some discussions are happening in order to bring changes in the URDPFI guidelines, which would be which I think in the current scenario are much required, and also the bylaws that would require a change. Be it, I'm sure these would be handled at respective state levels, but these are the need of the hour. And yes, I do agree, as stated by him that and other panelists, that we need to now focus on the planning which is backed by, or which is focused on health and the new norms of infrastructure. I another point that I really liked and which has been deliberated upon and has been brought about by almost all the panelists is the need for neighborhood planning and that principle of 5, 10, and 15 minute travel principle, which is which was, as rightly said by Shailendra earlier also, which was actually where the planning used to be done in India, as he had cited the example of Jaipur. Other aspects, I think, which do need a mention over here, and as rightly very interestingly brought about by Abhimanyu, is that travel will now happen more for leisure and social travel. Very, very important aspect. Yeah, I think that actually might happen because we have been all so much constrained in our within the four walls, and I think which would be happening in the near future, will continue to happen in the near future. So I think people would just want to drive out and take some break from their work life. Yes, this aspect of age of agility and mobility brought up by Shailendra, very, very much required actually right now. And the need for planning to be done in a holistic manner, I think this has been required from, I think, the very beginning, when the planning, formal planning, modern planning has started in our in this world. Uh, it has been the need since then, but focus has been shifting from one particular aspect to another, and it has never been looked at in a very integrated manner. I think now is the time that these things be looked at with a holistic approach, and things are done for the benefit of the citizen and the people living in the city. With that, I'd like to close the session and thank all the panelists and Kankan for beautifully moderating this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice speaking
Thank
to you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks a
See
lot.
you.